Today, ladies, our lesson comes from chapter 22, just verse 28. They begin to break up again into different categories. 28. This is so helpful. It's good instruction from the Lord. Chapter 22, verse 28. Will you please read, Sister Gabby?
No traspases los linderos antiguos que pusieron tus padres.
How interesting. Do not remove the ancient landmark which your fathers have set. The enduring word, would you please read it in English, please? I read it, but read it from your version.
Do not remove the ancient landmarks which your fathers have set.
Don't remove the ancient landmarks which your fathers have set. Enduring word explains this better for us. It says, from the days of Joshua, the one that took over after Moses, almost got them to the promised land. But Joshua took Israel on into the promised land. From the days of Joshua, he divided the promised land for the people of Israel. Each tribe got a certain section that God had given to them. They were landmarks showing the boundaries of the property. And it was a great crime, and it was a scandal to go and remove those landmarks. Landmark is a private land boundary, okay? There were piles of stones. They were marked out by sometimes stone pillars or by piles of erected stones for a memorial between the property to mark legal ownership. So the way they did the stones or the way they did the pillars, each one had a marking knowing this land belonged to Issachar, this land belonged to Nebulun, this land belonged to Judah, this land belonged. Each one of the tribes had a mark, a property line, so you would know what belonged to whom. That's from Walkie. Do not take advantage, either by plowing or breaking up a field. You see a field out there, don't take advantage next to that of a neighbor to set stones farther into his field that may enlarge your own. Sometimes it was a field and there were stones out there. They plow them up and set them further to make their land look like they had more land, okay? Take not what is not your own. Take what belongs to you and leave what belongs to someone else Such good in any case. Let all ancient divisions and usages connected with them be held as sacred. Whatever was given out long ago, let that stay like it is. Don't go messing with that. When it was allotted to certain ones, let it stay just like it is. And don't mess with it because that was sacred. The boundaries, this is good. They were sacred because God is the one that owned the land. Okay? He's the one that had given it to the fathers and their inheritance. To extend one's land to another's at another's expense was a major violation of the covenant and oath. You'll see in Deuteronomy 27:17. Cursed be he that removes his neighbor's landmark. And all the people shall say, Amen. Know that property is God's ordinance. God is the one that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. When you get something, it comes from him. If you are in an area, God gave it to you. We say, that's mine, that's mine, and this is mine, and I should get this and get that. But it belongs to God, and God has given it. A custom, a tradition, or a value should not be removed lightly. Don't take that lightly. We should never assume that our Father set such landmarks for no reason or for a bad reason. But unfortunately, the crime was easy to accomplish and difficult to prove, because people sometimes would go at night and dig up and move the line over so they could have more. Probably the boundary stone was moved annually only about an inconspicuous half an inch, which in time would size up to be a sizable land grab. So little by little, I tell you, that's why God is judging people in America and groups. They went in and took land from others that was not theirs and took over the boundaries and said, it's our land. But it wasn't. It belonged to God. And it was to be honored for those people what areas belong to them. That's by Watke. Benson's commentary says, whereby the lands of several possessors were distinguished and divided. Do not enrich thyself with the injury of other men, and do not invade the rights of others. Where there you see there was cemetery. Did I have some water here?
Yes, ma'am, behind you.
Oh. Okay. Excuse me. Do not invade the rights of others. Where you see that they just piled up the graveyards. You had no right to do that so you could build a mall. God said, do not invade the rights of others to enrich yourself. You never do that. It doesn't belong to you. It was given to certain, and there were landmarks there that should not be moved at all. It was passed down from generation to generation. Okay? Matthew Henry's concise commentary says, we are taught not to trespass another man's right. I have no right to go to my neighbor next door and take something out of his property and put it on my property. I have no right to do that. Or to move my fence over that takes up part of his property so I can say it's my property. We don't have a right to do that. Okay? Let's note Isaiah 5 and 8. Isaiah 5 and 8 says, woe unto them that join house to house, that lay field to field, till there be no place that they may be placed along in the midst of the earth. This is what Walford and Zuck says about this. Some people were acquiring much land at the expense of their fellow countrymen. They were just grabbing, taking, at the expense of others who already had a marker, a place there, a boundary. Fellow countrymen, they were selling houses, and they could sell houses permanently in a walled city. That was allowed under the law. In other words, if it was an enclosed city, they could buy the houses up like that, okay? Okay, until the year of Jubilee. But selling houses in unwalled cities until the year of Jubilee, which was the year they were to release the property, okay? When the houses would go back to their former owners because God had given the people the land. It belonged to them in an open field where it wasn't a wall built up city. They could not permanently hold that land. When the 49th year came, the year of Jubilee came, it went back. It reverted back to the original owner. Why? Because God had given that land for them to own. All right? When the house would revert back to the former owners, because God had given the people the land, they were not to get rich at others' expense. Because of this sin, the big houses and mansions the people once enjoyed would soon be empty because God would kill them out. That's interesting, isn't it? You come in and I want this and I want that and I want that house. I want this, I want that. So, well, that's so-and-so's farm. That's been in their family. I want that area. So we take fig vernacular way to get it. And you get it and you think you're going to live sumptuously in it, and God kills. He has something come along and destroy it. And the land is empty. You'll note that in Deuteronomy 28, 20 through 24. If we think that man can just do anything he wants to and get by with it, it doesn't work like that. Because God has the last say so. Believer's Bible Commentary says, the ancient landmark was a series of stones laid out, which indicated the boundaries of a person's property. Dishonest people often move those series of stones during the night, to increase the size of their farm at their neighbor's expense. But God sees it. God knows it. Gill's exposition of the entire Bible says, remove not the ancient landmark that their fathers have set, or the ancient border, or the boundaries by which lands, estates, and inheritance were marked. They were bounded and distinguished. They were set by ancestors in agreement with their neighbors, okay, which to remove was contrary to the law of God. It may not be with the law of man, but is contrary to the law of God. And a curse is denounced upon those that did it. And it was always considered a very heinous crime in early times. To move and to take over what was set by law, by God, as an inheritance, as a boundary, there was going to be trouble for doing that. The Bible reference commentary breaks it down even more. The technique described in removing the landmarks or moving them over is manipulation of markers or records. The boundaries are of a field or other important lines were often designated by the arrangement of stones at the perimeter of the property. Apparently, a means of stealing land as to move those stones, making it appear as if the border was in a different place. The equivalent deception in our time, it's equivalent to moving a fence or changing a map or uprooting a surveyor's stake. See, it makes more sense. Or altering a document. All of those things are considered moving an ancient landmark. You can either, in our time, move the fence, or you may change the map, or you may uproot the surveyor's stake. The surveyor has come out and surveyed the land and say, this is where this property starts here, the other property line is over there, so you move it. Okay, you uproot it. Or you go to the courthouse, or you find a will, or you find a document stating what's there, what the lines are, and you change it. And you place yourself in that. Before Israel entered Canaan, the promised land, the Lord commanded them, you shall not move your neighbor's landmark, okay? Which the men of old have set in the inheritance that you will hold. In the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. That's Deuteronomy 19:14. Remember when God told Abraham he would be father of many nations and he would inherit much land? And he would show them ever so often the area. And he said, now when I send you into the promised land, and you can read that in Chronicles, in Deuteronomy, in Exodus, in those places where you see where God gives a land out to each one. Each one had their own territory. Some over the river, some across before they crossed the river. They all had their own territory. Okay? God had given them the inheritance to possess the land. And later on, when Moses gathered the people together, before he died, he told them to divide the land by tribes. And they stood on two mountains. One mountain was Mount Gerizim. They stood there to get the blessings, to hear the blessing of being in the land. And the other mountain, they stood on Mount Ebal, and they heard the curses, what would happen to them if they didn't do what God said in the land he had given them to inherit. Among the curses was the one we just looked at in Deuteronomy 27:17. Cursed be anyone who moves his neighbor's landmark. They were blessed if they did certain things. They were cursed if they disobeyed God. and did things he told them not to do. And one of the curses was removing the ancient landmarks. That was not permitted. Because, why? God had given the land, not them. It wasn't theirs. God had given as he wanted it to be. He had given the inheritance. That was up to God. In a broader sense, this scripture brings out the warning of not to discard the boundaries set by prior generations. That's good. It is a warning not to discard the boundaries set by prior generations. It's already set. It's been set. It's not up to us. How sad where our forefathers worked the land, toiled to get the land, and then somebody come in and just uproot all of that. Because it's a pretty area, it's a lush area, it's a fertile area. I want that property. And so I find a way to manipulate so I can get it. God said you don't do that. You never do that. In other words, before you take down a fence, move the surveyor's mark, change the map, it's important to know why it was put up there in the first place. It's important to understand why it was put there in the first place. Because God has put in the heart of each generation how he wants it done. He knows what's best. He knows the heart of every one of us. He knows what's best. It is interesting as Isaac was dying and Joseph came in and bought Manasseh and the twins. And the boy that was oldest was on the right and the other one's on the left. But when Isaac got ready to bless, he crossed his hands. He knew what he was doing. He was following what God was telling him to do. It's not up to us. It's up to us to listen to how God puts it in the first place. He laid it out in the first place. And when we do that, he'll bless our life. You won't go lacking. You won't miss a thing. But when you're going to manipulate to get what you want or how you want, that's going to cause you to be in trouble. Because it's not yours to manipulate. It's not mine. I didn't work for the property in Breckenridge. I wasn't even born. I wasn't even in the picture. My grandparents toiled and bought and went with that and bought those properties. It wasn't my place to go in and start issuing out, you get this, you get that. That was already settled. That was already, well, I'm going to look at the will and see if I can contest it and do. That wasn't up to me to do that. I didn't do a thing to get the property. They are the ones that toil and struggle. Do you understand what I'm saying? To get it? God is awesome. You don't ever know. I don't know what he's going to have us to study. I don't read it until the day before. I don't look at it. I just know that God knows what's best. And all we need to do is do what God said. If we do, we will be blessed. Do the way he said do. Yeah, you can finagle and trick and get it, but you're going to have hell to pay for trying to keep it. You're going to struggle all your life trying to do your own way. When if we just do it right and do how God say do it, you will be blessed. You will have a blessing there, because we always will be blessed by being obedient to the Lord. Find out why it's set up the way it's set up. It's a reason for that. It's a purpose for that. God knows what he's doing. We don't know. And this world is not our home. We realize that. But God knows what's best. He had a purpose for where we are right now. How many times, how long, this area been here a long time. I mean a long time. I've been here over 50 years. It's been here before I even came on the scene. But God had a purpose for this spot that we are in. Isn't that amazing? And we looked at next door, and we looked at next door, we looked at down, on and on. But God, and we went other places. But when the time was right, he put us where he wants us to be. And we don't have to do anything but follow what God said. That's all we got to do. Just follow how he said. Because to try to remove and to take and to finagle so we get what we want, that's not going to work. It's not going to work out. Because it belongs to God. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And all we are stewards. We are to take care of what he give us. It's not ours. And remember how it said, how, people, you gonna take the diamond off of your dead father's hand because you want it. It wasn't yours. You didn't pay for it. If he didn't leave it to you, leave it alone. You don't have to do that. You're not going to prosper from it. It's not yours. What did you do to get it? How many hours did you work for it? God has it all in his hands. And all we got to do is do the way he says do. Carry it out according to his plan. And everybody will be blessed. Nobody will be left out. God is in the blessing business. If God gives the inheritance and he says, okay, you can sell it if it's in a wall, if it's in a city, you sell it and share it with everybody. Just do it that way. Why we got to do it another way? Come up with, I thought maybe. It ain't about what we thought. We didn't have nothing to do with it anyway. Where were you when they were working and toiling and struggling? You weren't even in the picture. You wasn't even old enough. All you was just a burden there to try to take care of you too. You wasn't in the picture. You had nothing to do with that. What makes me think, well, it ought to be me. I ought to. No. And so I need to go in and uproot and dig in there and where my grandmother lived, where on my father's side in a small town. She was such a Christian lady. I have a good, rich heritage. She lived by an old railroad track, and the men that would come off the train, she would feed them. And when they couldn't come in, she just had a little shack-looking house, but it was neat as a pin, and some chickens, and a few hogs and stuff like that. And you'd go down the step and back, it was kind of like a path, and then there was a railroad track back there, and the train, you'd hear it. And those transits would come off. They took a ride on the train, and they'd come off, and the word would get around. If you go to that lady's house, she'll feed you. And she'd feed them. They'd sit out in the yard. And they would tell the others that went on that line, don't you mess with that lady. Don't bother that lady right there. How kind she was to us. And she passed. And someone we knew, my cousin's gone now too, someone we knew they paid the taxes to try to get the property. But God worked it out where it came out. And by me being the oldest one, the other cousin called me and said, I think she left it to you. I said, honey, I don't want that. Give it to somebody else. I'm not going back down there. She said, well, this certain person is paying the little taxes. They trying to take it. Who do it belong to? It didn't belong to them. God worked it out where it went to someone that could have it. God is not pleased when we are trying to become rich at somebody else's expense. Because all of it belongs to God. He's the one that gave it. If we do things right and fair, God will bless. Now you may try finagling, many have. Many have done it and are doing it now. Unfortunately, our country is built on some finagling, some moving of landmarks, some moving of ancient boundaries, some taking up the surveyor's stake, some remapping the area. That's why they are rich. They're in the rich area because they move the stones in somebody's field. And little by little, they end up owning all of it, or most of it, and the person who it really belongs to is not there. But God sees, He knows, and He keeps a perfect record. Now, you're not going to finagle God's books. You can't manipulate God's books. You can't move His stake. You can't change His map. You can't move the stones He played. It's there, and He knows it's there. And since He's the owner, we're going to have to give an account to the owner. We just stewards, but He's the owner of it, and we have to give an account to the owner. Isn't that a good, rich lesson? Just helped us today. We thank God.